Hi, everybody. My name is Angie Viscianen, and I'm the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a pre-law mentoring program that connects prospective law students to lawyers for mentoring. And we started doing these meetups at the beginning of COVID-19 to allow people to connect with each other and find some resources during these trying times. And so we took a little bit of a hiatus, but now we're back. So I'm glad to have all of you on the call today. I have a very special guest with me. Today's guest speaker is Josh Bobrowsky. And he is a serial entrepreneur, and he found his way from law to being a full-time entrepreneur. And so I'd like to have him talk a little bit today about his path and share with you guys why he decided not to pursue the traditional career path of being a lawyer. So I will let him take it away. Josh?
Sure. Thanks for the great introduction. Just like a very quick background on me and my career path, it's been pretty non-linear. I started out with maybe around 17 years old, and I started my first company, which was a landscaping business, which was profitable and successful. And then got an undergrad degree in psychology, went to law school. From there, during law school, I actually never ended up practicing. I graduated from law school and started a small chain of CrossFit gyms. I spent about 4 years building those up by bootstrap with my co-founder at the time in that venture. When we sold those, I was able to make enough money to take about a year off and travel the world and just kind of relax. When I was traveling, I ended up hanging out in LA for a little bit after the traveling was over. I went to a few different places throughout the United States, and then Thailand and Canada and a few other places. While I was in LA, I ended up meeting a person who's currently my co-founder. He was starting a software as a service company for legal tech called Draft Law. And he and I started working together on that. And at the same time, I actually got recruited by a venture capital firm to help with a turnaround project of an oil and technology company down in Houston, Texas. The VC firm, I think, invested about $40 million and brought me and one of their venture capitalists in to help turn around the company, which ended up being successful. But while I was working on the VC firm, I was at the same time doing consulting with my current co-founder for his software as a service for a legal tech startup. And when we were doing that, we met up in a WeWork, and we realized that we could probably do a better job of creating a really high-end office space. So I ended up with just a pitch deck moving to New York City. I got an Airbnb. It was shared with 3 other people and had one suitcase of material with me, 4 shirts, a few pairs of pants. And he and I ended up raising one of the larger seed rounds in the United States of about $5 million. And then we built and operated a successful coworking company out of New York City. And we were named top startups of New York City. We were named top coworking spaces in New York City. I was featured in Entrepreneur Magazine, the Wall Street Journal. You can kind of go down a list of publications. We were profitable after 6 months, and then WeWork crashed. And at the peak of our company, our company was probably worth about $35 million. WeWork crashed, and after WeWork crashed, coronavirus happened, and we ended up not being successful and able to move forward through coronavirus. It's something that's happened to a lot of organizations. But now I'm kind of looking at winding that down and making sure that we're doing everything right on that process, and then looking at what the next steps are. But as far as my career path goes, I never actually practiced law. I would say that I've been relatively successful. I mean, I'm able to have a lot of really good experience. I've lived in about 4 or 5 different cities, and kind of very excited to talk with all of you, and very appreciative to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So Josh, you kind of blew through your law school experience a little bit. So I want to just hone in on that a little bit more. So can you tell me where did you end up going to law school, and why did you choose that law school?
Yeah. So I was I was a pretty fucking bad law student. I think I graduated maybe in the bottom 20% of my class, which, whether you realize it or not, half the people that go to law school will not be in the top half of your class. It's a weird thing. And 9 out of 10 people won't be in the top 10%. So when I went to law school, I went to Case Western Reserve. It's in Cleveland, Ohio. I chose it because it was a relatively respectable mid-tier law school that let me in. And that was kind of like my criteria. I think I applied to like 12 schools. I got into maybe like 5, and Case was my top choice.
Did they have like anything that was close to like an entrepreneurship or law hybrid? Did you consider doing a JD MBA? Like, did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur going into law school?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of figured I would be an entrepreneur when I went into law school. I specialized in commercial contracts for like commercial real estate. And I also tried to pick up as many classes on contracts, negotiations, anything of that nature. I ended up not taking a bar exam because I think when you're locked into a state, unless you have a deep connection with that state and know you're going to be there the rest of your life, it can be, it's a big cost and opportunity, and it's a big cost in time and effort. And so I knew that I wouldn't stay in one city, and so to be like locked into one place didn't make sense. And I think it's really relevant that, for the first year, I didn't think I was going to be an attorney, but I thought maybe I'd get like a summer internship at like a law firm and just give it a try. I'm in law school. So I submitted like maybe 100 applications to law firms. I got rejected from like 100 law firms. And, I think that was kind of like a pretty big wake up call to me, because I've had some, decent success. Like I was making more money running a landscaping company than any of my contemporaries were making at their internship at Big Law. And when I talked to lawyers, it was very apparent to me that there were like very long hours, and it's great if you can make like $150,000 or $200,000 a year, but if you're working 100 hours a week, it really isn't that much money in comparison to what you can make in other fields. And
I used to joke with people that, even when I was working at Big Law, if you broke what I made down to an hourly wage, it was probably dismal. So
absolutely. You can actually do the math. And if you think about it, if you're working like 80 hours a week and you're making, let's say you're working 80 hours a week and you're making $200,000 a year, you're making $50 an hour, which is, reverse engineering the math just kind of quickly in my head of how that works. And a lot of times, a lot of lawyers I know are working more than 80 hours a week and making less than 200,000. So if you're like contrasting that, it's really important to like think about how that works. And so from when I was very young, I actually met a guy who made millions and millions of dollars owning bubblegum machines. Like you put a quarter in, yeah. You put a quarter, but he owned tens of thousands of these machines, and every month you'd make like $5 or $10 per machine. And that made me realize that you can make an enormous amount of money doing something that most people don't even realize is a profession. And I don't believe for a second that people should be focused on the money. You should be extremely focused on what you're passionate about, what you enjoy, and what excites you. Because you can fail just as easily doing something you love as something you hate. And in fact, you're probably much more likely to be successful when you do what you love, because you're going to spend a lot of time and energy on it, and it's going to make you more excited. Looking at Angie, she's really excited about this group. You can tell she's super passionate about it. She lights up when she talks about it. And she's putting in the time and effort that if she was a wage earner in an hourly worker, maybe she wouldn't be going the extra mile for those things.
So tell me, when you were in law school and you're hearing all this noise about what everyone else is doing, like, how do you not get caught up in all that? How did you not decide, like, oh, maybe I should just go pursue your traditional law job?
Well, I mean, it's really easy not to pursue a law job and no one will hire you. But realistically, just looking at what the goals of people are versus what your personal aspirations are. So I paid my way through law school and undergrad playing poker. So I'm like kind of a risk-embracive individual. And I realized that a lot of people go to law school because they prefer to have stability. I mean, it's one of the really great things about being a lawyer is you know how much you're going to make with the relative, variance in between. And a lot of people really value that. For me, I never really was that into the stability. I was much more into doing something I love, having a big upside, and doing something that I felt was like really exciting, and also being in a position where I felt valuable and valued. I've been, kind of an operational either co-founder or CEO in almost every venture I've done. I've always kind of been backtracking a little bit like a marketing entrepreneur. So I did a revamp of Adidas's social media structure for the United States at one point as part of a team at Carnegie Mellon University. When I co-founded the CrossFit gyms, we have the largest online presence of any CrossFit gym in the world. So I own a YouTube channel with like over 50 million views. And to be honest, I think that one of the biggest challenges with law is I think I could have done a pretty decent job being like a partner at a law firm, but you would have to be like a junior associate, an associate, a junior partner, and a partner. And so I think
there's a lot of steps to get there.
Yeah, so I don't think I would make a very good junior associate. I mean, it's like, it's just not really a lot of room for creativity in that. And I think the biggest thing that's so important for lawyers to be aware of is that if you're not doing well in law school, to answer your question, when you're in law school, it feels like the entire world is predicated on your success or failure as a law student. And that's the only way to be successful. And that's the only way to make a living. And at this point in my career, I would say by almost any measure, I've been relatively successful. And I wasn't a great student. I enjoyed law school, but it was hard because when you're surrounded by people that think very differently than you, you have to be very confident in your own progression of your career for what you want to do. So it was challenging, but at the same time, I learned a ton in law school.
I think one of the things that I heard the most over the last couple of weeks is that everyone said that one of the most important parts of law school is building connections, networking with the people that you're in law school with. Do you think that you made any lasting connections with people in law school?
I'm still friends with a few people from law school, but realistically, I don't think people build a lot of connections in law school unless you're at like a top 5 school that doesn't have a class rank. When you're involved in a zero-sum game and like if you and I are competing against each other, whether it's a conscious or a subconscious level, you and I are always going to be a little bit opposite ends of the table. I would actually describe it very similar to like playing poker. I have some people that I'm kind of friends with from poker, but for the most part, like any dollar that you win is a dollar they lost. So there's always a little distance there.
We're going to need to talk about Texas Hold'em later at some point because I also played a lot of poker. But yeah, cool. I think it varies from law school to law school. I mean, I know with my law school, what I loved about it is that there were a lot more non-traditional people there. So it didn't feel like a bunch of competition all the time. Most of the people who went to my law school wanted to go for a second career. So the average age of people at my law school was much older than the average age of like normal law schools. Like normal law schools, the average age is like 25. I think my law school, the average age was 29. And so most people were successful in another career and then came to law school, which gives you a different perspective. Because I agree, if this is all you've ever known and you've come straight out of undergrad all the way through K through JD, and so much of everything in your life seems predicated on that success in law school. But I think for people who have had careers in their prior life before law school, they realize like, well, worst that could happen is I just go back to my very successful career in something else. And so I think it gives you a little bit of different perspective. So I like that you said that because I agree that like most of the people that you're surrounded with in law school feel that pull. Like the only thing that I can do is the practice of law. And that's the only way I can be successful. But I love that you're bringing a different perspective and saying, no, there's a bunch of other things you can do to be successful. And in fact, if money is really what you're after, there's a gazillion other ways to make money easier. So I think that that's really an important thing to highlight. So right out of law school, you said you went and founded these CrossFit gyms, right?
Yeah.
So how long after you graduated did you decide to pursue that, or did you do that like right away after leaving?
Well, I probably did that right away. Like as soon as I graduated, I think I was So my last year of law school, I attended the University of Pittsburgh Law School. There was actually, I found maybe what you would call a loophole where you could attend the law school of your hometown city under certain circumstances and all of your grades would be either pass, fail, or not. And Pitt never failed anybody, so I figured I could finish my degree and not really. One of the questions was, how did I make it enjoyable? Well, if you know you can't fail and you're only getting a pass fail and you're going to get your degree, that to me seemed like kind of cool. And so the demographic at Pitt was actually much different than Case Western. People were a little bit more calm, and like, I actually remember I had this conversation with, I had this really cool professor, and I went up to him after class and I was like, look, I really respect you. I really like this class. I don't want you to take it from a disrespectful manner, but like, I'm not going to try here, but I really like you in your class. And he was like, this is really weird. I've had you and one other student tell me this. He's like, absolutely no problem. Like, he was like a really cool guy. And I'm actually still friends with a few of the professors, like the professor of entrepreneurship at Pitt. Like, he and I are still friends, and he runs like a successful like business outside of his legal career. So I mean, I have made a network out of it. It has been fun. But I think
professors can be some of the best people to network with, because they do have that real world experience too. And people are always afraid to do it because you feel like there's so much power distance. But honestly, that's all in your head. Like, I think a lot of professors are totally open to just hanging out.
Yeah. And I think that, people shouldn't go into law for the money. It's not really a career where you earn an enormous amount of money in the early stages of your career. A lot of, there are some attorneys who do like personal injury who might, but realistically, most lawyers are hitting their peak earning potential somewhere in like the 60-year range, right? So it's being 60 plus years old, you'll be a senior partner, maybe you'll make a couple $1 million a year if you're working at a big firm. But outside of that, like, it's not going to be like, you're not going to be like riding around in a private jet. You're not going to be living in a $10 million condo, So I think that when you look at law, you should look at going into law because you are excited about the idea of what actually practicing law will look like, or you should be, interested in the subject matter and the process and like enjoying the learning. But realistically, if you contrasted like being a plumber with being a lawyer and you took the cost and everything else into it, it would take like almost like 8 years of practice of law to get to the exact same place monetarily that you get as a plumber.
Well, especially because you don't have to dig yourself into hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to be a plumber. So when you think of the opportunity cost on top of what you're making, I think you really do dig yourself into a hole. And, they say that a lot about med school too. Like, hey, yeah, sure, doctors make a lot of money, but you have to go invest so much money and time into becoming one that, honestly, at the end of the day, if your true motivation is money, there's a lot more efficient ways to make it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that 100%. I think I was really lucky between like playing cards and the amount that I earned after law school that I was able to pay off like the debt that I had without like very much problem. But looking at the math, like when you're making, let's say that you start out making like $100,000 a year, if you have $100,000 in debt, it's not dischargeable. So I think people should be aware. And I think anyone who's considering law should at least sit down with like an Excel spreadsheet and look at how much money you make after taxes in certain tax brackets. The fact that I think only the first like $2,500 or $3,500 of your accrued interest is tax deductible. So for anyone that's not familiar, like if you're making like $250,000 a year in New York City, you're probably going to take home about $125,000. And so half of your money goes away to taxes. So you're actually, to pay back $100,000, you're going to have to make $200,000. And realizing that is really important, because the biggest tragedy that I find is people end up doing something they don't like because they have to once they get that debt. And I just think that you're going to spend most of your life working. Like most of your life awake is going to be at your job or working on your job. And if you don't enjoy that, you're not going to be happy as a human being. And to me, success is very much about enjoying your life. It's not about if you make $40,000 a year and you're super happy, or you make $4 million a year and you're super happy, it's fine. Either one would be successful. But what is not success, in my opinion, is spending most of your life doing what you don't want. That's just like a bad way to live.
Yeah, I think the other thing that people don't realize is that, it's not just about the money that you make that makes you happy. It's also the people who are around you. What is that culture like? I think a lot of people end up going to these large law firms for the big paychecks, but then what they don't realize is you don't have a lot of control over your own destiny, right?
Right.
So, you better really love your captors. You better really love the people who are holding you hostage to your billable hours, because otherwise then it's going to be really miserable. Like, you either have to love the money, or you have to love the people, or you have to love something about it. But otherwise you're probably not going to make it, the entire time to get up to those levels where you can make that sort of money that most people dream of from large law firms. So I think it's a really interesting and refreshing perspective that you have about kind of, it might not be worth it at the end of the day if you're going for it for money.
I don't personally think it would be. I just don't think you make enough to justify it, but also very candidly, I know people that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars that are not very happy. And I know people that make $80,000 a year and are extremely happy. And it's exactly what you said. It's all based on your family, your friends, your relationships. That's where the success is going to be. And a lot of times having autonomy of choice over how you spend your life also factors into that.
So if you could go back and give yourself advice as a law student, what would you say?
I just don't take it too seriously. and that's probably like terrible fucking advice, right? Like,
no.
I mean, like, I was just never that good of a student. I wasn't really a good student in high school. I wasn't really a good student in undergrad. I wasn't really a good student in law school. Like, I was never bad. Like, you have to be relatively okay to get into like a decent law school. But most of the things that I'm good at, like in entrepreneurship, aren't really viable in school. So like being collaborative in school is like cheating, which I didn't do, but like being collaborative in the real world is like very helpful. Looking at resourcefulness, there's not a lot of measures of being resourceful in school. So law school is really good. If you're really good at law school, you might be a good fit at a big firm because you put in a lot of hours and you understood like the sandbox that you're playing in, which is being graded on your professor's exam, because most schools are like 1 or 2 exams per class. And, you might enjoy that. But I think that if you're not in the top 5 of your class, you're not in the top 10%, you should never feel badly about yourself. It's not going to be a reflection on your success. It's not going to be a reflection on too much other than the fact that you probably won't get a starting job at like, K&L Gates. You're probably not going to start out there.
Yeah. What do you like about entrepreneurship that you feel like you couldn't get out of a career in law?
It's the ability to kind of be super creative. It's the ability to work with people you admire and enjoy, working together with. Like, I'm winding down the business relationship right now with my co-founder, but he's like this brilliant guy. I mean, he's actually an attorney. He went to NYU, which is like #1 school for tax. He got his LLM there. And being able to pick and choose who you surround yourself with. And as an entrepreneur, you're really going to be choosing your own destiny, whether you're successful or a failure. I think either way, it's up to you. Like, no one is going to say that you can't do something, and at the same time, you can't tell somebody, well, I tried really hard and I made an excuse. Like, for me, like, great, coronavirus probably not within myself or my co-founder's control, but at the end of the day, it's not an excuse. Our business is no longer going to be operational into the future. And, being aware of that eat what you kill mentality, I really enjoy, whether it's for better or for worse.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found so shocking about entrepreneurship when I made the leap is that entrepreneurs, we kind of wallow, or not wallow, but we almost relish failure. Like, failure means you tried something and it didn't work, and okay, now I go do something else, But I think we look at it differently than lawyers. Like, I think lawyers and law students tend to be so afraid to fail, like so just afraid of it that sometimes it leads them not to try. But I think with entrepreneurs, like, you're encouraged to fail. Like, go out there, try it, fail hard, fail fast, and then, pivot, whatever you need to do, right? You got to find something that's viable. But what is your advice to people about how to handle failure?
Well, I think the first thing is to realize if you're successful at every single thing that you ever do, you're probably not trying difficult enough tasks to challenge you at the edge or outside of your comfort zone. And, I mentor a lot of co-founders. I, serve as an advisor to a lot of people. And this is kind of the advice that I give to them is you have to give yourself breathing room to make a mistake. And with that, I think it's fine if you are not successful in something. I think it's not okay if you failed because you were lazy, didn't try hard enough, or if you make the same mistake 5 times over again. That's really where failure comes in. But just trying things at the edge of your competency is really how you grow, and that's really how you are able to accomplish much more. Like, the most simple way I could describe it is someone might only be able to do 10 push-ups today, and trying 11, they might fail, right? But if they practice, they might get to 50 push-ups. And it's the same thing in entrepreneurship. It's the same thing in law. But you have to go outside your comfort zone. In law, that's not the same, because if you mess up outside of your comfort zone, it's like a binary thing. You have someone on the other side that can't wait to show you how dumb you are. And, it's not, there's not as much acceptance of error. I was dating a girl at one point who worked at Kirkland & Ellis, which is a great law firm. And as I got to know more about the firm and more about how their practice worked, a lot of times what a client would pay for wasn't necessarily some brilliant genius thing. It was a lack of a mistake. Like, for $1,200 an hour, you were guaranteed your document didn't have a typo in it. And that's really valuable in law. That's really important. So that's kind of my take on it. I think you have to be okay to not be successful. I think you have to not allow your personal value to be predicated on people's perception of you. And if you're and not trying to please your parents, or not living your life in a manner that is designed for someone else's approval.
I think that pleasing your parents part is a really tough one. I think a lot of us grow up in a culture where that is just, it's so paramount that you please your parents, you do what they want you to do. And it can be really, really tough to break out of that mold and say, this is who I am, this is who I want to be. So I like that you bring that up as well. Did your family ever put pressures on you to choose a more stable path than entrepreneurship?
If you want a lesson in how to disappoint a Jewish mother, open up a gym, and you can find a recipe for it right there. Well, in some senses there was pressure for that, but in other senses, both my parents were entrepreneurs growing up as well. So, by the time I got out of law school, my mom really didn't approve or wasn't really super proud of the CrossFit gyms. I think that's fine. But she was accepting and embracive that I kind of have an entrepreneurial drive and everything like that. And so you have to run a balance, but you have to realize that, your career, the things that you're doing, you're going to be living your life for you. Because if your mom's super proud of you and you're miserable every day of your life, that's a terrible way to be. You're going to end up marrying the wrong person, you'll get the wrong job, and you'll wake up and you'll be 50 fucking years old and not had any fun.
Yeah, I hear you. I told you I grew up with a twin sister, and I think, me and her kind of took turns who was going to be the black sheep of the year. And, my mom wanted doctor and a lawyer, ended up getting a physical therapist and a lawyer, but For a long time, I think both my sister and I fought both of our fates. You know, she didn't want to go to med school. I didn't really want to be a lawyer until probably about 6 months before I applied to law school. And, you know, in undergrad, I was in marketing and advertising, worked for an ad agency, did all those things because I had a much more business mindset. So I think that's right, that you have to just decide, like, for yourself one day, you know, I'm not going to please everybody. And sometimes it means I'm not going to please the people who are closest to me. But at the end of the day, the only person that has to be happy with yourself is you. You know, I mean, when you're on your deathbed, do you want to think, oh, I'm so glad that I made everyone else in my life happy and made myself miserable? Or do you want to say, you know, I went and lived the life that I wanted to lead? I think that's totally right. Spot on. So great advice. Does anybody who's listening have any questions? Feel free to chime in. I think, you know, we're probably at the point where we usually do the Q&A part. So feel free to turn on your videos, ask questions, or if you want to keep asking questions in the chat box, feel free to type them there and we can answer them. So do you use your law degree when you were in your entrepreneurial ventures? Has it helped you in any way?
Oh yeah, it's been hugely helpful, right? So for anyone that's not aware, even whether you have a law degree or not, if you're an equity partner of an organization, you can engage with all the legal documents as an agent of the organization. So, you know, I've been involved with drafting operational agreements. I've read over every lease for every organization that I've been a part of, done the redlining process. And I take a lot of pride in the nuances of everything from an operational agreement, employment contract, lease. Like you go down the line and understanding, you know, the triggers and pulleys in a venture capital funding document. I think those things are incredibly helpful. And, you know, just being able to operate in a way where you don't feel fully dependent on an attorney, where I recommend anybody that is retaining counsel to treat it the same way as if you had a child and retained a doctor, right? Like, you know, you believe the doctor knows what's best for your child, but at the end of the day, the child is really your responsibility. It's the same with the company. You know, that is your responsibility. So yeah, I mean, I found it incredibly helpful. And, you know, I think it was very worthwhile for me to go to law school, but from a business standpoint, I don't recommend most people go to law school. There's a question. If after you were overwhelmed with not having direction right after law school.
Well, first it was, did you decide to open the CrossFits after graduating or during?
Yeah, it was during. You know, in law school, I always figured I'd run businesses. And even now, like, you know, I'm not sure what my next steps are going to be, but I'm sure I'll eventually run another company into the future. Whether, you know, what dynamic that's in is a little bit open. But I think that you just have to be comfortable with not having a perfect direction. You know, if you ask people, like, you know, there's like a question in the law in an interview process, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, 100% of people fucking got that answer wrong 5 years ago. Like, literally, like, everyone today is in such a different place than you would have thought you would be 5 years ago.
I'm in the middle of a pandemic and I'm zooming through whatever I'm doing.
Exactly right. So, you know, I think accepting that, you know, having control is an illusion is really helpful. I mean, I think that an enormous part of any success that I've had has been based on luck. And I think that anybody that doesn't acknowledge that has been, and there are many, many people way more successful than me, but anyone who's truly successful that doesn't acknowledge that a big part of their success came from luck is probably not being honest. And so realizing that a lot of your career path will be determined by luck, and some of it by skill, and some of it by hard work. And, you know, if you're willing to continually work hard and put out your best efforts, I don't think that you need to be super nervous about not knowing exactly what the future is, because you probably, even in a career that feels stable, you wouldn't know the future anyway. I like how positive everyone is. Everyone tells me they like what I say. You got, like, a smart group of people here, obviously.
We tend to have a really solid group of people who come. They're always very open-minded and very embracing of new ideas. So I think that that's one of the things that I love most about interacting with our community is always people who want to hear from lots of different perspectives. So that's why I bring people in here like you that do very non-traditional things, because I think it's important for people to have lots of different perspectives instead of just the traditional, like, oh, you've got to go to law school, you've got to go get a job at Big Law, you've got to put in 5 to 7 years, and then you've got to become a partner, all of that.
Yeah. I mean, what I really recommend to any law student is go out and look at who you think are the 5 happiest or most successful people that you know. And I wouldn't judge it based on, how wealthy they are alone. If that's a measuring stick for you, that's fine. It doesn't have to be. But I would look at who you know that's the happiest, and I would look to engage them as mentors, or who you know that is your definition of successful, or living the life that you wish you were living. And I would look at kind of how they did it or how they got there. I've been super fortunate to have like a lot of really, really great mentors along the way.
Oh, you just struck a chord with me. You know that one of my biggest passions is mentoring. So can you tell me, how did you build mentoring relationships with your mentors? What did you do to be a good mentee?
Yeah, I think putting in work to being a good mentee or protege is incredibly important. First thing you have to look at from your mentor's perspective, I try to find a position where I have a symbiotic relationship, where even if they're much more knowledgeable than me, I can at least help give a different, maybe intelligent perspective on a different dynamics. Like one of my mentors, he owns one of the larger commercial office companies in the United States, several million square feet of space and trophy buildings throughout the country. And I learned so much more from him than I could have given back. But I always tried to value his time extremely highly. And I would try to never ask a question I could Google. I would try to prepare for any conversation that we would have, realizing, some of my mentors are extremely successful by like any measure. And when you're that successful, realizing the most valuable thing that you have is time. Everyone wants a piece of your time. So respecting that, trying to, it was symbiotic with our relationship where I had a co-working company and he owned commercial office space. So any value I could bring to him, and then more so than anything, being appreciative, and truly understanding how valuable their time is, and that they could spend it doing a million other things, and having gratitude that they're taking the time to educate you, because realistically, people at a certain level of success, they're not going to get a monetary reward from helping you. It's going to be something outside of that.
Yeah. And how did you find these mentors? Did you go seek them out? Were you assigned mentors in some mentoring programs? Like, how have you identified the mentors in your life?
You know what? I just found people that, like, just luck and happenstance, and some distant family members, and some, like, my mom's a mentor, like, my cousin Anthony's a mentor. I have people that are more distant, they're mentors. Also realizing that, like, I wouldn't look for one person to be perfect. Like, you might find a mentor that's like incredibly brilliant at relationships, and you talk with them about like your interpersonal relationships, whether it's with like your significant other or your parents or something like that. You might find somebody who's amazing at business and have them as a mentor in a certain capacity. You might find somebody that's like a really great mentor in like fitness or something like that. And so you can have different mentors for different things, and each one's like totally different as far as how I found them. It's really been across the board. But when I find somebody that I really respect, I try to reach out to them, and also realizing that, like, you don't go up to somebody and be like, "Want to be my mentor?" That's fucking weird. It's just like, it'd be like, Angie, if I went up to you and was like, "Want to be my best friend?" It'd be like, you're kind of a fucking weirdo. I mean, maybe, I don't know. But, taking time to see, you and I were talking a little bit before about a co-founder. Same thing with a mentor. You have to enjoy being around them, and they have to enjoy being around you. So it's a two-way vetting process.
Yeah, it's a little bit of chemistry, right? It's not going to work with everybody. I think that that's an important thing to say. Like, hey, yeah, you should look for mentors in lots of different areas of your life. Don't just focus on your career, right? I mean, there should be mentors in personal areas of your life. You should find mentors in any way that you can. And sometimes your mentors are peers or people who are behind you. I have learned so much from people who are junior to me. It is insane, like how much I've learned from people, especially in the last 2 weeks when doing this boot camp. I learned so much from the law students who participated in it. I learned so much from the people who are about to enter law school who are participating in it. And, I find that oftentimes when I go and find a mentor, I end up teaching them something, even though I'm the junior. So it's like, I think.
And that's the whole thing. That should be how the relationship works. You're a good protege, right? If you're a protege or if your mentor is only giving to you and you're just taking, that's not a relationship.
Exactly. So what are some of the things that you've seen your proteges do that you really like? Is there anything that has stuck out to you as, man, that was a really, really good way to build a relationship?
I've seen a lot of different things that are very positive. From my perspective, the biggest thing is the reciprocal of what I'm saying. When they value the time, if, whether I'm the protege or I'm the mentor, if the advice that is given was followed through on, one of the things that's hard as being a mentor is like, a lot of times you'll have people reach out, be like, hey, I want help. And they don't really want a relationship that is you helping them. Sometimes they'll want almost you to do something for them, or they want you to tell them how to do something that would be very easy to learn on their own, or they don't do the follow through. So the opposite of that is totally true. The great people that I've mentored have really followed through on the things that I've said. Sometimes it's really important that they challenge your perspectives, whether they're correct or incorrect. Everything that I say just because I'm your mentor doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean I'm fucking smart. I could say the totally wrong thing, and being able to be like self-reflective of if that advice works for you. Like, one time someone was asking me for advice on a resume, and I was just like, I don't know. I don't know how to submit a resume. I know how to build a resume, but I don't know the specifics of your role in your class and how the computer algorithms will work. And, as someone that I work, trying to help out, they're just like, oh, I really appreciate you saying I don't know. So I think that's another thing. But just following through on what they say they'll do, respecting your time, and working hard. I think everyone wants to see their mentees be successful or their proteges.
Yeah, I always tell my mentees, I'm like, the most rewarding thing for me is when you take my advice, you experience it, you tell me and report back, like, yes, this worked for me, this didn't work for me, because it helps me calibrate my advice for other people. It also, lets me know, one, you were paying attention, two, you actually had some follow through and went and did it and lived it for yourself and got some experience from it. I think the worst thing that a mentor feels is whenever you feel like your advice is just falling on deaf ears and like, okay, you've just, taken 45 minutes of my time and I have no idea what you're going to do with that advice, and maybe you never did anything. And then you're just like, you just feel like the relationship is just taking and taking and taking. It's not giving back. And so I completely agree that you should follow through with the advice and tell them whether it worked or not. It's just as good of feedback if it didn't work than if it did work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. Follow through.
Was there a time in law school where you felt like your future was helpless? Or actually throughout your entire career, have you ever felt helpless, and how did you cope?
Well, no. The worst thing that happens is you run out of money, right? You go figure out a way to make more money. That's not really helpless. I think that, every person in the world is going to have days and times when they doubt themselves. And I think not being mad at yourself about it and realize that's part of being human, and whether you're looking at feeling imposter syndrome or whether you're looking at, whether you're looking at just doubting if you're capable of yourself. And yeah, of course, every single person is going to have down days, down times where they don't feel their personal best. And maybe that lasts a minute, maybe it lasts a week. But just realizing that it's a temporary situation, your own value is not based on based on outside circumstances, I think is a good way to stop from feeling helpless. I think anyone in this economy has to realize if you're not getting a job, you're not necessarily of a low value. It's just, it's a challenging time. And not letting that define who you are. I mean, as long as, if, it would be like asking if anyone felt helpless when they didn't run a 5K in the timeline they wanted to do it. Probably not, because you realize it's just a 5K. And at the end of the day, I think the same thing could be said for a lot of career and things of that nature. It's just part of your life. It's part of who you are. And who you are as an individual is made up of a lot of pieces. You're going to be a daughter. You're going to be a husband. You're going to be a father or a mother. And so who you are is really an amalgamation of many things. I don't think you should feel helpless if you got into law school. You're probably kind of smart, at least a little bit.
Well, and where you put your self-worth is all within your control.
Yeah.
I think that that's the important part to know, is that yes, you could always point to something in your life probably where you're a failure. You could probably also always point to something in life where you're a success. And you need to figure out for yourself, like, how do you define success, and know that you have the control over how you define success. If you're letting other people define your success, don't be terribly surprised if you're not meeting the expectations of other people and you're miserable trying to meet those expectations. Take that control back and decide, like, this is how I'm going to view my success. And this is how I'm going to view every incremental success to get there. I think that a lot of people view success as a destination. Like, one day I will arrive at success. And it's like, no, there's a lot of incremental steps that you take to get there. And you should celebrate those incremental steps that you take and know that, like, failure is not a destination either. So, like, all the times that you feel like you fell, that's just the first time you tried, probably. Or maybe it's the third time you tried. Or who cares if you failed on the fifth time that you tried. But it's all a part of that incremental journey towards whatever you're trying to get to, right?
Sure. So this is really interesting to think about. If the audience isn't aware, like, Harvard used to only be predicated on grades. But the problem is the self-worth of the individuals that went to Harvard, they were almost always like the smartest person in the room, in every room they were in academically. But kind of what I've talked about before is, like, 9 out of 10 people won't be in the top 10% of the class at Harvard. So when they went to Harvard, they started to feel like a failure because they were average. Most people were average, right? But everywhere else in the world, they were the smartest academician that they knew. So what the Ivy League schools started to do is they started to make it a requirement that you were well-rounded, having a sport, having an instrument, having travel, having multiple languages. And so then the students stopped being depressed because, okay, fuck, I'm not the smartest academician in the class, but I am the best violinist. And there actually ended up being a much higher level of satisfaction with themselves because they realized their entire self-worth wasn't based on a singular attribute. So if you're in law school or something like that, same fucking thing applies. Have other stuff that you're good at too.
For sure. Were there times when your JD degree came in handy during your entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, 100%. I think that if I just owned some gyms, I'd probably be like, looked at as maybe not quite as intelligent. I mean, I'm not really that smart to begin with, but having a law degree, like I said, you can't be that dumb if you graduate law school. So I think that after I did my gyms, when I got recruited by the venture capital firm, probably having the JD was helpful. I think it's been very, very helpful to have on the resume. I think it's been very helpful to raise capital. I think that it's the reason I met my co-founder because he was doing a software as a service company for law firms. It's been super fucking helpful, but it has not been helpful in a linear career trajectory of I applied for an in-house counsel position. I spent 10 years there and then I became the CEO.
Thank you so much for your time, Josh.
Good, thank you for having me.
I really, really appreciate you for being here. I loved hearing about your journey. And yes, I would love to, connect afterwards and
Absolutely.
learn more a little bit about what your next what your next venture will be.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, let's definitely connect. Thank you again so much for having me on here, and we'll keep in touch for sure.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, all.